Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we will be previewing Game Week 20 and there is a ton to discuss around which premiums to own. Should we be buying Kane and KDB, selling the likes of Salah and Darwin? Should we be taking hits? Should we be playing chips? And if not, what's the best chip strategy? And loads of other questions as well. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. We are on the road to 60,000 subscribers, but without further ado, let's jump into today's video. So I think I could categorize maybe 80 to 90% of the questions around Game Week 20 that you've posed to me over on Twitter around the premiums. A lot of people wanting to know, should you bring in Kane? A lot of people wondering whether KDB is worth the money over someone like a Mahrez. Lots of people wondering whether they should sell Darwin, sell Salah to bring in the likes of a Bruno, a Son, maybe a Kane if you want to. So I thought the best thing that I could do is show you all of the underlying data and some of the fixture difficulties and projected points for all of the premiums and just have a bit of a discussion around them. And hopefully me discussing them will help you to answer some of the questions that you've got. And you guys know on this channel, I try not to tell you what to do. I try and present information to you and allow you to come to your own decisions. So hopefully this little discussion here should do so. I have got Darwin in there. I know Darwin is kind of like a half premium. I wouldn't call him a premium at 8.9. However, a lot of people are having to sell Darwin to get to a Kane, to get to a KDB, for example. So the reason I've put him on there is just that you can compare him to the premiums to see whether he's worth it. Now, these are underlying statistics. I've got big chance involvement per 90, which is basically big chances created plus big chances the player gets themselves. And I've also got non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. I know a lot of people have issues with underlying statistics, especially for someone like Darwin, because they'll say, well, it doesn't matter how much XG that player accumulates. If they don't score, they don't score. If they're not going to convert the chances they get, then who cares how many chances they get? For me personally, I am very, very big on underlying statistics because if you put a good player, and again, someone like Dalot is a good player, he is a good finisher. If you put them in the position to score goals over and over again, they will eventually start scoring, usually sooner rather than later. I've always said I would much prefer a player that gets chances and accumulates XG, i.e. gets in the opportunities to score goals, rather than a player that gets one big chance every 4 games but always scores that big chance. We've seen with Son is usually an excellent finisher, but he's not even getting the chances to finish. That becomes an issue. So I guess I'm defending players that have decent underlying data that aren't converting, such as a Darwin. That's just my personal way of playing the game. You don't have to follow that. You don't have to insult me in the comments. It's up to you how you want to play the game. But I'm explaining why I've got underlying statistics here, because I think underlying data is a much better predictor of future performance than just looking at has that player been scoring recently. Like I said, I've also got projected points from Game Week 20 to Game Week 25. And I've got fixture difficulty from Game Week 20 to Game Week 25. All of this data is from Fantasy Football Hub. There is a link in the description if you want to check them out. So with all that being said, the players that stand out when you look at underlying statistics are 2 players. Number 1, Darwin, who has the best big chance involvement per 90 in the Premier League this season, and also has the best non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 in the Premier League this season, shortly followed by Haaland. So those are the 2 that by some distance stand out above the rest. So as you can see here, Darwin has a 1.51 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 this season in the Prem. And over the last 6, I think it's actually even higher. And big chances, he's involved in 2.68 big chances per 90. Like I said, that's a combination of creating big chances and also having big chances himself. So he's a player that is getting a ridiculous amount of chances to score goals. To put that into perspective, like I said, it's better than Haaland at 1.39 non-penalty expected goal involvement and 2.47 big chances. But if you're looking at players that are going to get the opportunities to score goals, Darwin and Haaland stand out above the rest by some distance. Of course, the issue with Darwin is he's not converting them, whereas the issue with Haaland is he's over-converting. He's outperforming his expected data. So we might see a slight drop-off with Haaland, maybe not. He is an elite finisher. I would expect, despite him looking pretty poor via the eye test with his finishing, I would expect Darwin to start to convert eventually. Whether you want to wait for that's up to you. Like, if you tell me I'm selling Darwin, he's not scoring, that's absolutely fine. Like, I've never told anyone I think that's a bad idea. I guess I'm just explaining why I'm slightly hesitant to sell Darwin to try and fund someone like a Bruno or a Kane when the data is, in some cases, worse than half. Now, if Kane is going to convert twice the amount, then I guess that doesn't matter as much, which you can understand why there are slight nuances when you're looking at underlying data. So you've got you've got Haaland and Darwin that are quite clearly above the rest. And then you've got 3 players who I think a lot of people are struggling to choose between. And they have virtually identical data when we're looking at non-penalty expected goal involvement and big chance involvement. And that is Kane, KDB and Salah. As you can see here, according to Fantasy Football Hub, over the season, non-penalty expected goal involvement for Kane, KDB, and Salah is all within 0.03 of each other. So 0.89 for Kane, 0.86 for KDB, and 0.89 for Salah. So the three of them, when we're looking at total non-penalty expected goal involvement, are virtually identical. There is a slight nuance here, though, in that KDB's is massively made up through expected assists. I think he's expected goals, I don't have it to hand, I should have, but it's about 0.15 to 0.2, depending on the sample size you're looking at. And then the rest is made up through expected assist. Yes, his total non-penalty expected goal involvement is very similar to Kane and Salah, but he's not as much of a goal threat. Now, that isn't an issue if the players that Kevin De Bruyne is assisting is converting, which is often Haaland. If KDB gets an assist or two, he's almost always on max bonus as well, just because he creates so many chances and his passing accuracy is very high. So it's not an issue, but you do want your midfielders to score goals. When you're looking at, for example, KDB last season, when he got that monster haul, he scored 4 goals in a single game. That's what you really want from your midfielders, to get those massive hauls, especially if you're looking to captain them as well. So whilst I don't mind the fact that KDB has more assist threat than goal threat, that's always been the case. His goal threat is very low this season, so he's not necessarily getting the chances to score goals, and that's really what you want from your player. Whereas Kane and Salah is more of an equal mix between the two, slightly leaning towards goal threat. So for that reason, I maybe would slightly prefer Kane and Salah. I think the real thing that is massively in favour of KDB is he's very consistent with his underlying data. He's playing in the better team, so you would expect them to keep creating chances and scoring goals as well. And then the main thing is he's got 2 confirmed doubles in Game Week 20 and Game Week 23. At the moment, Salah doesn't have a single double confirmed. Now, there is a chance for a Game Week 21 double. At the time of recording, I don't know whether that's confirmed yet or not. I don't think it's a massive chance. I think it's sitting at about a 50% chance of a double. So at the moment, KDB's got 2 extra fixtures over Salah up to Game Week 23, and that is massive. And that's why you can see here, Haaland and KDB, the City assets, have the best fixtures in the league up to Game Week 25, whereas Salah and Darwin are down at 19th because they just don't have any extra fixtures. So that would make me lean towards KDB ahead of Salah, despite the slightly worse underlying data, in my opinion, because more of it's made up through assists. Because he's got 2 extra fixtures, assuming he actually plays those 2 extra fixtures, you would say that that's maybe a slight advantage over Salah. Kane's obviously got 1 extra fixture over Salah, but 1 less than KDB. So I guess I can't tell you who's the better asset. I think all 3 of them are extremely similar. Kane being on 4 yellow cards for 1 more game, basically, until the threshold increase. That is a slight worry. So if Kane gets booked in the first game of Game Week 20, he will miss the second game of Game Week 20. But after the first game, Spurs have then played 19 games, and Kane's threshold will increase to 10 yellow cards. So it's only 1 more game he's got to get through. Let's wait and see if that happens. But I think it is virtually a 3-way coin toss. If you have a slight preference for one of them, just go for it. Or maybe if you think, I've got Kane already, it's not worth making the switch to KDB, or I've got Salah, I'm going to hope that Liverpool get a double in 21 and I'm not going to make the switch. The only reason, like I said, that I like the switch from Salah to KDB, not the statistics, is just the 2 extra fixtures. If you think that is worth it to make the switch and you can do it for free, I would probably do it. I'm not a massive fan of taking out Darwin and Salah when you look at their data for hits, especially when it's part of like a -8 to get rid of Darwin and Salah. Yes, they aren't converting. And yes, that can become an issue over a longer period of time. But just, we saw in the FA Cup, they scored a goal each. They will start converting chances as long as Liverpool continue to create them. And whilst Liverpool have been very shaky at the back, as we'll discuss in the next section, going forward, they're still creating a ton of chances. So I still like Salah and Darwin, maybe slightly biased towards them as FPL assets because I own them. If I was choosing completely fresh, if I was making a wildcard team now, for example, I would have Haaland. I would still probably have Darwin, believe it or not, and I would have KDB. I do think KDB, if you had a fresh choice, is probably the best out of Kane, KDB, and Salah at the moment, but I think it is very tight. Just to say also, I've got Sterling, Bruno, and Son in there. None of them have got great underlying data. I don't mind Bruno because he's got a double in 20, and I think there's a 60% chance, Ben Crellin has said, of a double against Leeds in Game Week 22 as well. So Bruno could have 2 double game weeks in the next sort of 3 game weeks, which is massive. But I think I still prefer the likes of Rashford and Martial and then the Manchester United defenders as well, as we'll discuss in a few sections. So hopefully that was helpful to discuss some of my thoughts around these premium players. For me, Haaland's a no-brainer. Despite him not converting any of his chances, I still think at some point Darwin will come good. But if you want to sell him, I fully appreciate that. And I think the best premium after Haaland is probably KDB. If you want to go for a 3 premium, that's absolutely fine. I think Haaland, KDB, and then one of Kane and Salah looks like a really good choice. At the moment, I'm currently leaning towards keeping Salah, keeping Darwin and hoping that they convert their chances soon. But if I could go from Salah to KDB in one move for free, I would probably do it. Let me know down below what you think of all of the premiums, and hopefully that section was helpful for you. So following on from the premium discussion, there are quite a few questions around defenders. I think some people still, like myself, holding on to Reece James and maybe looking at replacements long term. Some people looking at the Manchester United defenders and saying, is it worth it? Can we still invest, or have we sort of missed the boat with their 3 easiest fixtures now gone? And just a lot of people may be looking to take some money out of the defense as well. Maybe you own Cancelo and you're looking to sell as well. So what I thought I would do, I'm going to look at Shaw versus Dalot in the next section. So if you're interested in Manchester United defenders, that will come next. With attackers, I don't think it necessarily makes too much sense to look at the team's attacking data. I would rather look at the players' attacking data. That gives you more of an idea, because they could play in a terrible team, but they could be hogging all of the chances and still have decent data. That happens with like talisman in teams. But for defenders, I think it makes sense to look at team data, because the main thing you want from a defender is the clean sheet. Yes, it's great if they get bonus points. Yes, it's great if they have attacking data, good attacking data as well. But the main thing we're looking for is defensive data from the team. So what I've had a look at is, over the last 5 game weeks, I've taken a smaller sample size. I've looked at some of the defenses that are doing well. And I've also looked across the season as well to give us more of a macro look. So hopefully in doing this, we can look at some trends and look at some of the defenses that are worth investing in. These are just a few of the stats that interested me. By all means, go over to somewhere like Fantasy Football Hub if you want to and look at some of the expected goals conceded yourself. But these are the ones that really stood out to me. So this is expected goals conceded data. Gives you a bit of an idea about how many goals they would be expected to concede based on the chances that they've conceded in those games. Interestingly, Manchester United are the 4th best defence in the league this season, across the entirety of the season, and also they are the 4th best defence across the past 5 game weeks. So lots of people saying that the reason Man United have kept 3 clean sheets and the reason that they're doing well is because they've had 3 really easy fixtures. This would suggest that across the entire season, we're still the 4th best defence in the league. So if you are looking at someone like a Luke Shaw or Diogo Dalot, as I said, I'll discuss in the next section, I really do still like them. You are looking at a very, very good defence that you would expect to continue to keep clean sheets. From game week 22, I think, to 24 or 25, we have 3 out of 4 home games as well. Manchester United are much better defensively at home. So I still think, yes, you could say I'm a biased Manchester United fan, I still think Manchester United are a defence worth investing in. I don't think you've missed the boat, and I do think we have a few good options around that sort of 5 million and below price range. Around the best defences, very interestingly, Newcastle, Arsenal and Man City are in the top 3 defences in the league this season, all very, very close for expected goals conceded. But they're also the top 3 defences over the last 5 game weeks as well. So whether you're looking at a small sample size or whether you're looking at a really big sample size, the best 3 defences in the league are Newcastle, Arsenal, City, and the 4th best defence is Manchester United. So when we're looking at Reece James replacements, if you're looking at taking some money out of Cancelo and you're looking for players to invest in, Luke Shaw, Diogo Dalot, one of those. We'll discuss that in the next section. Botman, I still think he's great to invest in alongside Trippier for a double up. I still think the likes of Ben White, Zinchenko, Gabriel, those Arsenal defenders are really nice. The issue with Man City is we just don't know who's nailed. I think Ederson is still the safest bet. I really don't know out of the likes of John Stones, Akanji, Diaz when he's back, Walker, Lewis, Cancelo, who's going to start all of their games? Probably none of them. So if I was building the ideal defence, this is going to sound very biased because this is my exact defence. I would say Ederson in goal to cover the Man City clean sheet, a Newcastle defender such as Trippier, an Arsenal defender such as a Ben White, and then a Man United defender such as Luke Shaw. That is my back 4. Looking at the data, that looks like a pretty safe bet as well. So I would be looking at defenders from those 4 teams if you're looking to replace and take money out of Reece James and Cancelo. Some other interesting stats. Liverpool are the 4th worst defence in the league this season and the 3rd worst defence over the last 5 game weeks. So whether, again, you're looking at a short sample or whether you're looking across the season, Liverpool are one of the worst defences in the league. And this is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, Trent, Robertson, etc. are still not worth investing in. But number 2, this is genuinely a defence worth targeting. This is now a green fixture. If you're looking across the season and they've now lost Van Dijk, looks like due to injury, they're having issues with Robertson as well. It could make their defence even worse. This is a defence worth targeting. This is not a defence that's even mid-table. Like I said, you can change the sample size all you want. They're not defending well. So at the moment, until we see a change in their defensive data, I would start targeting the Liverpool defence, and we need to try and change our preconceptions around the Liverpool defence being a strong one. And I think that is an interesting stat there. And I've just pulled this one out. Give Nottingham Forest a bit of credit. Nottingham Forest have been the 3rd worst defence in the league this season. But across the past 5 game weeks, and they haven't necessarily been easy fixtures, they're now the 6th best defence in the league. So I think it is worth looking at some trends like that and looking at some teams that have gone from being a pretty poor defence to a great one and from a pretty great one to a poor one and trying to understand, is that just due to the fixtures? Is that just a small little bump in the data? Or is there something more meaningful there? But Forest at the moment don't look like a defence worth targeting, especially at the City ground. If it's Forest away, I would not target that with your attackers. They look like a decent defence at the moment. So hopefully some of that data is interesting. Definitely target Newcastle, Arsenal, City and United. And there are some really good cheap options. Speaking of which, let's take a look at Dalot and Shaw. So hopefully this section should be useful if you've not got any Manchester United defenders and you want to know, should you go with Dalot or should you go with Shaw? It'll be incredibly useful for you, hopefully. If you've already got Shaw, and maybe you're looking at Dalot, hopefully this will be useful. And maybe just to know whether the Manchester United defence is worth investing in either singly or as a double up. So firstly, fixtures-wise, obviously it's a double game week in game week 20, but City at home and then Palace away at Selhurst Park, I don't think that's a great set of fixtures defensively. You would expect Manchester United to concede against City, although it being at home gives them a greater chance of keeping a clean sheet. And then Palace away, you'd say they've got a reasonable chance for a clean sheet, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's a banker. So I guess you're hoping for one clean sheet from the two games, appearance points, maybe a couple of bonus. Maybe you're hoping to come away with around 10, 11 points. I think that would be a really good result with a Manchester United defender. But don't be surprised if you walk away with 3 points if City batter Man United and Palace score. After that, it's Arsenal away. As you can see here, I've got Crystal Palace at home and Leeds at home. And Leeds has been crossed through the question mark. At the moment, there's a 60% chance that Manchester United and Leeds is rearranged into Game Week 22. And that is dependent upon Manchester United and Leeds both avoiding an FA Cup fourth round replay. So assuming they both get through the fourth round, no replay required, that fixture can go in there. It's interesting because then Leeds at home would be only a few days before Leeds away. So Manchester United will basically play Leeds twice in the space of about 3 days. That's no issue. We've seen it in the past. But this would make sense from a scheduling perspective because Manchester United are running out of midweeks to rearrange these fixtures, especially if they get further in some of the other competitions. So trying to get this Leeds game scheduled in as soon as possible makes sense. So Ben Crellin and Lego Mane and, like I said, Mikel, the people that predict these doubles, are expecting that game to go in there if both Leeds and United avoid a fourth round FA Cup replay. So that is something to consider as well. That would be 2 double game weeks in the space of 3 weeks. Outside of that, it's then Leeds, Leicester, and then from game week 25 onwards, Manchester United's fixtures clear up a little bit. So fixtures-wise, I definitely think they're worth investing in. Price, 4.7 for Dalot, 5.1 for Shaw. Again, I think that is a very reasonable price. So it comes down to what do the underlying statistics look like for them? We know they're the 4th best defence in the league. Is it worth going for one over the other? So as you can see here, when they start, they tend to see at least 80 minutes or so. Luke Shaw's had a couple of early substitutions. I think Dalot's come off in 1 or 2 games. But generally, they are 90-minute men and they'll definitely get you 60-plus points, which you need for the clean sheet. FPL points-wise and expected FPL points-wise per 90 over the season thus far, Luke Shaw is definitely coming out on top ahead of Dalot, which I was surprised about because Dalot was in really good form before his injury. 5.29 for Shaw and 3.92 versus Dalot's 3.79 and 3.75. What this does suggest, though, is Luke Shaw is outperforming his expected data. So Luke Shaw is getting more FPL points than the data would suggest he has deserved thus far. So maybe we're not expecting 15 pointers every week from Luke Shaw. Expected goals-wise, non-penalty expected goals, Luke Shaw is at 0.07, Dalot is at 0.09. Neither of them are a great goal threat. They're not going to score you many goals. I know Shaw has just scored, but they're not going to score you many goals generally. Dalot is just about favouring there. And then expected assists, they're very similar as well. And this was what I was surprised about. Because if you remember the narrative before Dalot was injured, he was creating a lot of chances. And we were discussing the fact that if he continues to create chances at that level, can he compete with the likes of Cancelo, Robertson, Trent? We were discussing Dalot that highly before his injury. And then Luke Shaw, I've heard a lot of people say that Luke Shaw's data isn't great. This would suggest that you've got 0.22 non-penalty expected goal involvement for Shaw, and you've got 0.23 for Dalot. So they're virtually identical. And when you look at big chance involvement, Luke Shaw is basically getting involved with that being having a big chance or creating a big chance every 3 games, whereas Dalot, we're looking at a big chance involvement every 4 games. So by all accounts, I would argue that Luke Shaw is the better asset to own at the moment. And the reason that I would say that, as well as just the data being slightly better for Luke Shaw, is basically comparable, is the fact that I think Luke Shaw is slightly more nailed. Yes, Malacia has been playing okay. He's not been playing poorly at all, and he's definitely fit enough to compete with Shaw. I still think Shaw is by far and away our first choice left back. I think he's significantly better than Malacia. Previously, I would have said that Dalot was a lot better than Wan-Bissaka, but Wan-Bissaka in Dalot's absence has been extremely good. And I think that just whilst Dalot's finding his feet and trying to get back to full fitness, we might see a little bit more rotation than you would usually expect with Wan-Bissaka with Dalot. So I would say that for the short term, next maybe 3 or 4 game weeks, Luke Shaw is slightly more nailed. Over the long term, I'd say they're both nailed. But considering that the data is very comparable, considering the fact that Luke Shaw has been playing really well and Dalot's only just coming back from his injury, I would probably say that I am favouring Luke Shaw at the moment. So if you're choosing between them, I would still lean towards Shaw. If you're asking me, is it worth doubling up, and this is a decision I have to make myself, I think it's absolutely worth doing so if you want to. Like I said, I still think the Newcastle City and Arsenal are 3 better defences than Manchester United, and you can get the likes of Botman and White for cheaper than someone like a Luke Shaw. So you might want to go there if you want to diversify a little bit. But the fixtures are still good coming up. We're still a good defence across the season and recently, and you could potentially get two double game weeks with okay underlying data for the two of them. So yeah, I think going for Dalot and Shaw is fine. I will just caveat that Aaron Wan-Bissaka could share minutes with Dalot in this double, and I guess Malacia could share minutes with Shaw as well. Yes, I think Shaw is nailed, but that does not mean that he doesn't sit the odd one out here and there. I still think he's slightly more nailed than Dalot. So hopefully that was useful, coming from a Manchester United fan, and also coming from someone that's just looked at this data as well. Lean towards Shaw. Dalot's good as well. I don't mind the double up. So a lot of the other questions were around whether it's worth taking a hit, how do we value transfers? So I've got 2 questions here, and I'll try and answer both, and it gives you my perspective on hits. Now, I don't think there is a correct way to look at it. It depends on how you value them. It depends on whether you use like EV, expected value, or whether you use just eye test, whether you're interested in winning the game or whether you just want to have fun. There are so many things to consider. And at the end of the day, we can't predict the future. I might tell you that on paper, a -4 looks terrible, or I definitely wouldn't take that -12. And it could be that the 3 players that you bring in absolutely smash it, and the 3 players you take out all blank. So there is no right answer to this, basically, but I can tell you my approach to it and when I tend to decide whether it's worth taking a hit or not. So the first question from Craig was, as many content creators are scrambling and looking at taking hits, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how much a transfer is worth and how to decide, for example, Mitrovic to Martial for free this week, but then next week you might want to maybe take Martial out. So do you consider bringing him in and taking him out? Are you just considering that first transfer? And would you see something like that as an 8-point transfer, even if both of them are for free? Now, I'm not necessarily saying this is the only way to look at it, but I view every transfer as being worth 4 points. The reason for that is I just think transfers are incredibly value. And if you maybe use a free transfer this week rather than rolling, it might be that in the future you need to take a hit, which would be 4 points anyway. So my view on a transfer is always view the transfer as being worth 4 transfers. You're not always 4 points, I should say. You're not always losing 4 points, but that's the way that I would view a transfer. So yes, in short, taking out Martial, bringing in Martial and then taking out Martial, I would look at that as a 2 transfer move, and I would look at that as being worth about 8 points. Again, if both of them are for free, you're not losing 8 points. I still think it's worth that though. So for me, I tend to prefer bringing in a player when I think it's for at least 2 to 3 game weeks, preferably 4 to 6. Yes, I took out Martial last week for Mitrovic, but unless Man United got the double in 20, which at the time didn't look that likely, it looked possible, I wasn't always going to bring Martial back in. So I looked at Mitrovic and thought, I'm happy having Mitrovic for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So I saw that as a slightly longer term transfer. Bringing in Martial this week, I don't think you would necessarily want to take him out next week. So I don't have an issue with that as much. So that's my perspective on how I view transfers. Then the question comes around taking hits and what is my cap for the amount of hits you can take in a single week? So someone said, what's your hit cap for the upcoming game week 20, -4, -8, -12, -16. If you follow my content last season, I took a -20 hit 1 week, and then the week after that it was a -12, and then the week after that it was a -8. The reason I took such massive hits last season, if you remember, we had like blank game week 27, double game week 28, blank game week 30, and then there was like a double in 31 or 32. So we had loads of blanks and doubles coming up, and if you made the right transfers, my -20 hit gave me 18 extra fixtures with the players that I brought in. So that's when I think hits are worth it. If you're bringing in KDB for a hit, he'll give you 2 extra fixtures in Game Week 20 and Game Week 23. If you're bringing in a Manchester United player this week, and we do get the double in Game Week 22 as well, again, you're getting 2 extra fixtures if you take out a player that isn't likely to double. So that's when I like hits, when you're getting extra fixtures, or maybe when you're taking out a player that has a blank game week, because you're almost guaranteeing you're going to get some points back because you get the extra appearance points. The next thing that I want to say about hits is that I don't value hits in total. I don't look at that and say a -24 is too much or a -16 is too much. I would rather look at each transfer. Do I like Mitrovic to Martial for a -4? That's the first one. Do I like Foden to Mahrez from a second -4? That's the second transfer. Do I like Salah to KDB for a third -4? And so on and so on. I wouldn't look at that as a -12. I would look at each -4 transfer. The only issue that sometimes you have with viewing it as each transfer is sometimes you have to downgrade one player to upgrade another player. And in doing so, then you look at as a cumulative set of transfers. So sometimes if you're rearranging funds, you need to look at it as a total set of transfers. And then when it comes to deciding, do you think the player that you're bringing in over the set amount of weeks that you're bringing in, so let's do the Martial Mitrovic example. Do you think Martial, over the next 3 or 4 game weeks, will outscore Mitrovic by at least 4 points? If you think the answer to that is yes, then take a -4 hit. That's absolutely fine. It's not always in the week that you bring that player in, they have to outscore the player you take out. It's for the set of weeks that you plan on owning that player. The final thing around hits is I just wonder, do you have to make that transfer? Can it wait a week? Or maybe are you just getting a little bit overeager by wanting to own all of the best players all the time? Because you can't have the best team every week. So whilst a -4 might look decent on paper, you might go, oh, actually, that might look nice. Do you need to make it? Can you delay that till the next week when maybe you can make that transfer for free rather than actually losing 4 points? And are you maybe just being a little bit overeager and trying to build the perfect team every week, which just isn't possible in FPL unless you take a stupid amount of hits every single week? So hopefully that's clear. I've not really answered any of the questions for you. I've just given you my general perspective on how much I value transfers as, and I do value them as being worth 4 points, and whether I would take a certain amount of hits this week. I would try and look at each transfer independently, and whether you think you are getting at least a 4-point upgrade in each transfer over the set amount of weeks that you plan on owning that player. So the final kind of category of questions were around the chips: bench boost, free hit, wildcard, and triple captain as well. This will be useful whether you've played most of them, you haven't played any, even if you've got a general chip strategy in mind. I think this should be helpful for you. I'm going to deal with bench boost, free hit, and wildcard first, because in my opinion, I don't like playing any of the 3 chips this week. In my opinion, I'll explain why. Triple captain's slightly different. I actually don't mind triple captain in Game Week 20, maybe Game Week 21, but specifically Game Week 20 for Haaland, I quite like it, and I think it's slightly different. So I'm going to discuss that one next and focus here on bench boost, free hit, and wildcard. So some of the questions is, if I have a strong bench in 20 or 21, especially with the doubles, is using the bench boost an option? My team's a bit of a mess, and I've got multiple fires to put out. I've heard loads of people say that I've got loads of fires to put out. Is it too early to use the wildcard? In my opinion, I don't like the bench boost. I think it's too early to use the wildcard. And I don't strongly usually say something this strong, but I think that using the free hit this week, in my opinion, is a terrible option. I strongly believe it is not a great week to play the free hit. The reason for that is free hits are extremely useful if there's a massive double game week. Like some double game weeks will have like 16 to 18 of the teams doubling, in which case by free hitting, you can sometimes get an extra 10 to 12 fixtures in your team. Whereas this week, you've probably already owned 4 or 5 doublers. Your team's probably generally quite fine. You might have a few fires to put out, but you probably don't want to bring in too many doubles anyway, because the doubles don't look that great. So I don't understand why you would want a free hit to bring in doublers. And the other reason is often, and this is generally how I play it, a free hit is actually better played in a blank game week rather than a double, because you might feel like you've got fires to put out now, but sometimes you'll rock up to a blank game week and you've only got like 3 players. That would be a bigger issue for me than having not enough doublers, or maybe having a few fires, like maybe you want to sell Darwin and Foden. I don't think they're as big of those fires are as big as you would maybe have in a blank game week later in the season. So that's why I hate free hit, personally, in my opinion. If you want to play it, go for it. Bench boost and wildcard, I can understand the perspective slightly more. Wildcard, you're changing your team for the long term. Maybe you think you want to own Arsenal, Tottenham, and City assets anyway, and they've got doubles coming up, and you want to own those players, and you feel like you can restructure your team. And maybe bench boost. Maybe your bench is just looking really strong this week, and maybe you've got loads of double game week players, and as a result, you've got to bench the likes of a Martinelli and an Ødegaard, and you're looking and thinking, actually, that bench is looking strong. So I understand that. Let me talk you through the upcoming blanks and doubles and explain why I think they could be better weeks to play it. So the biggest 2 blanks that we're likely to have, probably the only 2 blanks, we might have a mini one here and there, is Game Week 28. Looks like it will be the biggest blank game week of the season. Could have as many, I think, as 8 fixtures blanking, but we should have, I reckon it looks like about 4 to 5. So I think about half the teams will blank in Game Week 28. And unfortunately, it looks like a lot of the teams that blank will be players that we own those teams from. Let's wait and see how it plays out. But it looks like Game Week 28 could be tricky to try and navigate without the use of either a wildcard or a free hit either side or during that game week. So I think 28 looks lined up as a decent week for the free hit at the moment, but you could potentially want to wildcard before or after that as well. And game week 32 looks like it will still be a relatively big blank game week, but maybe slightly smaller than game week 28. So immediately, I think they are 2 weeks where the free hit might be useful, and also where you might want to play the wildcard either side of it to try and deal with the blank. For example, you can dead end into a blank game week, which is terminology we use, which basically means you try and bring in blank game week players, but you maybe don't want those players long term. For example, let's say that, I don't know, Brentford as an example, have a fixture in game week 28 and you bring in triple Brentford for that fixture to make sure you have a team, it might be that you don't want triple Brentford long term, so you dead end into 28 and then you wildcard the other side of it. So I don't know at the moment how I'm planning on playing my chip strategy, but they look like 2 weeks that we will need to navigate, and a free hit / wildcard could be useful. Then when we're looking at big double game weeks where we might want a wildcard or bench boost or even free hit, game week 29, the other side of the blank, looks like it could be a massive double game week. Game week 34 and game week 37 both not only look like big double game weeks, but also good double game weeks. And by that, I mean the teams that could potentially double and the fixtures that they have on paper, it looks like there could be quite a few teams with really nice doubles in 34 and 37, and that is often the way, as we've seen in previous seasons, we almost always have a double game week 37. So what I'm saying is, if you want to play the free hit bench boost or wildcard, like, go for it. If you feel like that's the strategy for you, I'm just warning you that we've got 2 blank game weeks at least and 3 double game weeks at least coming up, where the chips that you might use this week, I think will be better used later on. So it's a case of delaying gratification. It's a case of waiting and being patient. And I think by the end of the season, when you climb up your mini leagues in game week 34 and game week 37, for example, I think you'll be glad you waited. So for me, bench boost, free hit and wildcard is a no, personally. Let's take a look at triple captain, though, because I think that's slightly different. So the wonderful Ben Krellin over on Twitter has put together a tweet where he's discussed potential doubles in the future for Manchester City. And I think this is incredibly useful because I think most people will want to triple captain Haaland this season. He's the player that has performed the best. He's shown a very, very high ceiling, which is rare for a striker, but he's shown on various occasions he can get a hat-trick. So I think triple captain Haaland probably makes the most sense on paper, but you don't have to do that. I think there are tons of players that could definitely outperform in any given week. And if you time that well, it could be massive. And in general, I do prefer triple captain a midfielder because midfielders get the extra point for a goal. They get the extra point for a clean sheet. And it just feels like they have to do less to get a monster score than a striker does. And we saw that last season. Triple captain KDB got you like 90 points. And triple captain Salah got you around that set of points as well. So I don't think triple captain Haaland is the only way to play it, but I think for most people, that does make the most sense because he's been the most consistent and he's got a very high ceiling. So what we've got here is the confirmed doubles, which is game week 20 and game week 23. And then Ben Crellin has listed in the other double game weeks that I discussed earlier in the video, 29, 34, and 37, the potential doubles for Manchester City. Now, this is depending on domestic cups, European progression as well, and just depending on how far Man City and the opponents get in various competitions. So I won't go through all the permutations now because it's not necessarily important, just to suggest that they probably will get future doubles outside of 20 and 23, and these are the ones that they could potentially get. So the confirmed double this week, obviously, is Manchester United away and Tottenham at home. And then in 23, it's Aston Villa at home and Arsenal away. Now, both of these double game weeks are before Champions League football begins, and I think that is one of the major advantages of doing it in 20 or 23, is that you've got no worry about him being rotated and rested for the Champions League. It might not happen anyway. Like, there's a strong chance that he just plays every game anyway, and that we don't need to worry. But game week 29 to 37 could be slightly more of a worry, especially if City have either wrapped up the league, or potentially if Arsenal continue to perform the way they have, if they've got no chance of winning the league. It might be by game week 34, 37, Arsenal have pulled away, or maybe City have pulled away. So you've got those worries later in the season, and Haaland might get injured. It might be that Haaland gets injured in game week 26, and all of a sudden you've lost what would have been a fantastic triple captaincy option, and you've got to captain someone that you don't prefer as much that you would have with Haaland. So I think there are slight worries around waiting than just moving now. Haaland's fit. Haaland will play every minute at the moment, or I would expect him to, especially when it's someone like United and Tottenham. You know he's going to play those games. You know he's going to play most of the minutes. Maybe you just go for it. So that's the advantage to playing it now. When I look at the 2 double game weeks, I think they're virtually identical because I think Aston Villa at home is obviously a great fixture, but I would argue Tottenham at home at the moment is a decent fixture. Yes, Tottenham do tend to play quite well against City, but this is a different Tottenham and a different City. So I don't tend to look at historic data too much, and I think that is a fixture that City will fancy themselves to win quite comfortably. And Manchester United away is not a great fixture, but again, we've seen in the past Manchester United absolutely demolish, Man City demolish Manchester United. And again, like I said, I don't really care for the historic data, so I'm not necessarily saying that. But in big games, anything can happen. And would I be surprised if City absolutely batter United and Tottenham? No, I wouldn't. So I don't mind the double, but it's certainly not an ideal double game week. I think last season, I can't remember what the double was. I think it was Norwich and Leeds for Salah. That's the sort of double game week you want for a triple captain. So I probably think they're relatively equal. Arsenal away is a really tricky fixture. Villa at home is quite nice. United away, Tottenham at home. You could pick either. But as you can see, the possible doubles later in the season definitely look a lot better. So game week 29, City have Liverpool at home, and then they could have either Bournemouth or West Ham rearranged for game week 29. So they could have a double of like Liverpool and West Ham or Liverpool and Bournemouth. 34 is the one that really stands out as a lovely double if they can get it, which is Fulham away, and then it could be one of, again, Bournemouth, West Ham or Brighton. So the best fixture that you could get there is they could have a double City of Fulham and Bournemouth in game week 34. I would much rather captain Haaland, even with slightly limited minutes in that double game week, than I would in 20 or 23. And then 37 is Chelsea at home, and then again, one of Bournemouth, West Ham or Brighton, depending on progression of City and the other teams in different cups. So I guess this is to say I don't know what the doubles will be in the future. You don't even have to triple captain Haaland if you don't want to. I do think there will be better fixtures on paper and better triple captaincy options maybe on paper than there are this week. But the great thing about this week is you know Haaland's going to play both of them. There's no UCL football, and Tottenham at home does look like a really nice fixture, and United away, anything could happen. So let me know down below if you're currently planning on triple captain Haaland. I don't hate it, but I think at the moment I'm probably 80% likely to wait later in the season and hope that City get a really nice double in one of the future game weeks, and that Haaland is still getting regular minutes in those game weeks. So I can tell this video already is going to be an incredibly long one. So I'm going to try and quick fire through these final questions asked at the end, as I always do. If you do want to ask me questions for future videos, do follow me over on Twitter at FPL__Raptor. So let's fire through them. Who is the best Man City midfielder other than Kevin De Bruyne? Is Mahrez an option? The truth is I have absolutely no idea the answer to either of those questions, because we just don't know who Pep's going to play. And we have no idea, and if you try and pretend you do, you don't, of who he's favouring at any given point and who he's going to play. At the moment, absolutely, Grealish and Mahrez look like first choice for Manchester City on the wings. However, Foden will start games, so will Alvarez on the right. Bernardo Silva can play on the right as well. And we just don't know in which games Pep thinks a certain player will play well. For example, last year against Manchester United, Foden scored a hat-trick and played on the right wing. Since then, he hasn't played on the right wing. That's the only game he's played, and he scored a hat-trick. So why has Pep not played Foden again? Is Mahrez going to continue to start ahead of Alvarez? I don't think so, because I think Alvarez needs minutes and he's been fantastic. Or will Alvarez take minutes off Haaland? Basically, I don't know. If I were to go for a midfielder other than KDB, yes, Mahrez would be my second choice, but I don't think he'll start both in the double. I think he'll play one, maybe come off the bench in the other. I think Alvarez might start one on the right. And if not Alvarez, we could see Foden, but more likely it would be Bernardo Silva on the right. So again, I don't know. But yes, Mahrez is probably the second best option outside of KDB. I would just go for KDB if you can, and probably avoid the worry altogether. Although, again, even KDB isn't 100% nailed. Is it time to sell Salah and Darwin? As I said at the start, the answer for me is no. The data's really good. If you want to sell them, though, and it's to get someone like Kevin De Bruyne in, I don't hate it. I wouldn't do it for a hit, though. I think Salah to KDB for free makes a lot of sense. Kane in for Darwin for free makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure I like either of them for a hit, just because I do still think Salah and Darwin are good options. But so I don't mind selling them, but for me, it's probably not going to happen this week. Is Eriksen an option for Manchester United as the third asset? I don't mind Eriksen. He does play relatively deep, though. I do think he's reliant on some decent shots from outside the box, set pieces, and just popping up at the right time. His data this year is decent. It's about a 0.4 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So on set pieces, pretty much nailed, and he does get opportunities. I still think there are better options. I prefer Rashford, Shaw, and then one of Dalot and Martial, but I don't mind Eriksen if you want to go for a cheaper option in the midfield. When will we get double game week 21 news? We might already have it at the point of you watching this video, but if not, if we're going to get double game week 21 news, we're not waiting for anything in particular. So I would assume it's going to come on either Tuesday or Wednesday. If we're waiting towards Thursday, Friday, I have no idea why we would wait that long. So for me, I think the chances are that we'll get it earlier in double game week 21, but let's wait and see what happens there. Before double game week 20. In this current week that we are in, I think we'll get it towards the start of the week. Let's wait and see, though. If we're still waiting by the end of the week, I think it probably looks unlikely for a game week 21 double. And then the final question, could we just ignore double game week 20 and double game week 21 altogether and just bring in players that we want long term? For example, Arsenal and Brighton might not, but I know two players that I'm looking at, and a lot of people are the likes of Ødegaard and Matoma. Should we just ignore Man United, Spurs and City assets and just go for players that we want? This can work. It can either backfire terribly or it can work fantastically. Sometimes doubles just aren't all they're made out to be. For example, Mitrovic and Andreas. I know that Andreas has one more fixture, but everyone broke their teams to try and get these players in. Mason Mount, for example. Again, I know he has one more fixture, and they've not done that well. And this happens in FPL. So sometimes doubles are overrated. And if maybe quietly you're just building the perfect team that you want and it's just ignoring these slightly worse doubles that you don't really want to target, sometimes that works. But in another game week, we could see the likes of Shaw, Rashford and Dalot all score a goal and all get loads of points. So Is not a one-size-fits-all answer to this, but yes, I do think this is a fine strategy. If you're not interested in the doubles and you just want to build a team that you like long-term with a nice structure, that's absolutely fine to do. So hopefully quick firing those few questions has helped. Let me know down below in the comments if you have any questions that I've not answered in today's video. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 20 preview. Apologies for it being a long one, although let me know down below if you prefer these longer videos. I used to do it a lot more last season. This season I've condensed them down a bit, but let me know if you enjoy the longer videos. And if you are somehow still here watching and you've enjoyed it, please do drop a like. Drop a comment down below to feed the algorithm gods. Whatever you want to comment, go for it. And also make sure to subscribe as well. I'm trying to hit 60,000 subscribers as soon as possible. And then we'll be on the road to 70,000 as well after that. So thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.